What is asthma? For a completely healthy person, this word sounds, if not threatening, then certainly alarming. Another reason is that breathing itself is the most important life-giving function of the body, and those who are prone to asthma symptoms are associated with the danger of suffocation. The heart and lungs are the two most important human organs, the manifestation of diseases of which, in a commonplace sense, is associated with an immediate danger to life. In the meantime, in the case of asthma, the problem is somewhat different. Well, asthma is a direct manifestation of lung disease, an extremely important reservoir that supplies the human body with oxygen. However, asthma itself is not one of those diseases that pose an acute danger to human life. This is a chronic disease, and of course, if it is not treated and the condition has become protracted, can significantly shorten the human life cycle. However, it is the external manifestations of the disease which have such a frightening effect on the surrounding healthy people that make a person seriously engage in their own health at an early stage. And what's more, in the history of mankind, there are enough examples when people with chronic advanced cases of asthma achieve significant successes in science, art, politics, and other socially important areas of activity. The combination of a person's strong will with the provision of internal mechanisms of resistance to disease has repeatedly led to outstanding results, revealing such capacities of the organism that a person in normal health did not even suspect. And we will talk about such cases today. But first, let's look at the external signs of asthma, which give a person an indication of his or her lung problems. Respiratory congestion, which is already becoming chronic, manifests itself in hoarseness, breathlessness. The patient cannot breathe deeply in this state, as they say. They experience chest tightness and an accelerated cough. These symptoms occur because the muscles around the lung air spaces are constricted due to inflammation. The inflammation itself is caused by various reasons, and this is worth to be talked about separately. In the meantime, we note that the symptoms listed above are usually episodic, manifesting as seizures. Attacks begin in the most unexpected way and can stop just as unpredictably. But such situations occur in a mild, early form of the disease, whereas a neglected disease manifests itself as attacks, requires immediate medical intervention, and is fraught with unpredictable consequences. Asthma attacks often occur during physical exertion, during sleep, when a person is exposed to gusts of wind, and also under the influence of well-defined provoking factors, pungent odors, when dust enters the lungs, in viral diseases, which aggravate the course of the disease. Smoke, fumes from a household stove during cooking, causing a strong cough, can provoke the manifestation of the disease. These fumes, mixed with the smell of flavorings and various sauces, additives, spices, can cause a serious allergic reaction, up to a gag reflex. Not to mention the man-made fumes emitted into the atmosphere by industrial plants. I'd like to give an example of a fact of life that happened to a friend's wife back in the 80s of the last century. The couple attended the swimming pool, where the water was thoroughly chlorinated for disinfection. My friend's wife suffered from a mild form of allergy which manifested itself quite irregularly, and she never underwent an in-depth examination to find out what caused a recurring allergic reaction. On their first visit to the pool, they were worried that the reaction to chlorine might be unpleasant and unpredictable, but they had no problems. The pool was a pleasure. But one day, everything changed dramatically. Once in the street, after leaving the pool, the woman felt a sharp asphyxiation. A strong cough arose. All this happened about 20 to 30 minutes after leaving the water, and there was no reason to associate it with chlorine in the pool. But when this repeated next time, they became seriously worried and analyzed the situation more deeply. It turned out that they had simply changed the parking location of their car and, accordingly, changed the route to it after the pool. It was determined that this time it was by a location where concentrated chlorine vapors were emitted into the atmosphere. Although it was done in accordance with established environmental standards, high enough from the ground, But even that small dose of concentration was enough for the sensitive organism of an allergic person to react accordingly. They had to change their way to the car, but visiting a doctor for a deeper examination showed the initial stage of asthma development. As they say, a blessing in disguise. The above initiating agents are a very small part of what can cause an external manifestation of the disease. Even in such a seemingly favorable place for our body as a forest, and especially on lawns with flowering meadow grasses, disease episodes can manifest themselves with no less force. The strong smell of herbs is no less a provoking factor than kitchen fumes. But if being in a forest or in an open area, for example in a field, is not at all where the ordinary modern urbanized person usually stays, then when you're in an urban environment, there are a number of health hazards for an allergic person, which are also difficult to avoid. This is, for example, about involuntary communication with your neighbor's pets, or the problem may arise simply while walking around the city, in parks, in places where dogs are walked, especially if the animal is long-haired. Well, if you have a pet or a bird living in your apartment or house, the risk of your body's allergic reactions increases many times. The same constant exposure occurs if a neighbor with a pet lives next door and constantly walks his or her pet. Another, no less allergenic pathogen is tree pollen. Clearly, it's impossible to find consensus with a neighbor about his or her dog's walking time either. But what about the tree blossom factor, which is everywhere, in rural and urban areas alike? So, despite the fact that asthma is not one of the acute deadly diseases, it causes a person, especially with an advanced form of the disease, a lot of inconveniences and even suffering. And if the disease is not really detected in time and thorough medical treatment is not started, this can lead not only to inconveniences, but also to serious everyday disasters, have a significant impact on the work and, accordingly, on the material status of the patient. For a child, untimely detection of the disease can result in missed classes at an educational institution and, accordingly, an academic decline. This happens quite often, especially in low and middle-income countries where the detecting and treating asthma is not organized at the proper level due to the insufficient amount of money allocated for this by the state, due to the generally low level of medicine. It was mentioned above about the external manifestations of asthma, often expressed in very specific attacks. Now let's touch on a number of the key reasons that cause the disease. Modern people's striving for success in life, everyday concern for solving routine problems, all the new temptations of a modern civilized society usually do not leave the vast majority of us time to take care of our health. That's why the emphasis in our conversation on the fact that without a healthy body, one's life can become a misery, if not at all superfluous. After all, even small preventive measures of a daily nature can prevent the occurrence and development of asthma. To be continued in the next episode. Stay tuned.